the Honorable Bruce Golding, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, and his lovely wife, Lorna, a couple equally gifted with intelligence, charm, and a deep commitment to public service. To Stephen Hill, our founder, visionary, and his delightful wife, Sharon, scholarly daughter, Alexandra, and Sharon's beloved mother, Faye Heslop, who has overcome much to be here with us this evening. The others who are sharing in this program, who will be introduced later, our devoted advertisers and important viewers and friends, we thank you and warmly invite you to this, the 9th CIN Lecture Series. Who would have thought that we would be here 20 years later? Now, this is our 20th anniversary, and we had a lot to talk about, and we did a wonderful supplement on our past, and we received many, many accolades from supporters who talked about what CIN has meant to them. And so, to start off the program, I just want to lift one comment. I want to lift one 2 to 3 minute comment that was part of that Gleaner anniversary supplement that talked about CIN. It really brings together how it all happened. And it goes like this: most important innovation started with a simple idea. Such was the genesis of CIN in 1993. The best-known TV service of its kind started 20 years ago was questioned by Stephen Hill. Two keen observers of market trends. How could they deliver advertising supporting homegrown television to Jamaicans living abroad? The concept seemed logical. After all, programs from other nations could be seen around the globe, so why not entertainment and news from the Caribbean? He envisioned a vehicle for the presentation of culture, information, and linking those abroad with current content from home. All the elements seemed to be in place. There was an abundance of quality television available, and in 1993, the global spotlight was on Jamaica for a variety of good reasons. It was the year that the Jamaica Observer was launched by owner Butch Gordon Stewart, where the Summerfest was held for the first time, Runnings was produced, and the 18-year-old Lisa Hanna crowned Miss World 1993. It's all right. Stephen, an entrepreneur with an accounting background and entertainment industry pedigree, and Ronnie, his creative partner with a music background, traveled to New York in the spring of 1993 in the hope of finding a local television station willing to broadcast programs from the Caribbean. It was an unprecedented pursuit. At the time, there was no digital delivery. Cable had yet to discover the Caribbean audience. Then shows from home were delivered by FedEx, DHL, and VHS tapes. Interest was not so great once tapes arrived. They were copied and recopied, and by the time the tape arrived, the images were so often so faded at the point of bringing it was barely recognizable. The early broadcasts were attempted in Canada, the UK, and other parts of the US. It became clear that the real success was possible only here in the New York market, home of the largest and most prosperous Caribbean population in the diaspora. It was their good fortune to have contacted WNYC TV Channel 31, a broadcast station owned then by the city of New York. The first half hour was broadcast at 1 a.m. on Saturday, June 26, 1993. At 1 a.m. in the morning, Oliver at Large. The community response and press reviews was sensational, delivering a one household rating equivalent to 800,000 homes in the metropolitan area of New York. This early success quickly became appointment television for those who helped us grow the schedule over the years to 25 hours. When the city sold the station in 1996, Channel 73 became the new and current home for CIN. With that move came more broadcast hours across the week. A popular addition to the TV programs is the annual CIN Lecture, representing renowned intellectuals from Jamaica And beginning in 2004, these thought leaders have included luminaries in politics, education, business, culture, and the arts. The first 20 years have been a great accomplishment. As we look to the future, we are ever mindful of the basis of our good fortune. Our success is due to our committed advertisers, loyal viewers, talented producers. For this support, we are eternally grateful, and I applaud you. And now, we have an exciting program this evening, and you'll be hearing more about our speakers coming up. But to move the program along, I'm going to introduce a very special friend of CIN, Mr. Dale Dodd from Jam-Pack. And Jam-Pack is a unique and, I think, very powerful organization. They have this spirit of increasing awareness and education and quality education in Jamaica. And I'm sure Dale's going to share much of that vision, some of that vision with you tonight. But I want to welcome him as a friend of CIN and someone that I've come to know and admire because of the important work that this organization continues to do.
Thank you, Bob. Very kind words. So I have like about a half an hour speech, so I get comfortable. I'm kidding. I'll be 2 minutes. In any case, Honorable Mr. Golding, Mr. Hill, Mr. Bob Gore, Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Hayden Carter, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for coming. It's good to see you. Once again, Jam-Pack is very pleased and very privileged to be a part of this wonderful lecture series for several years now. And it's great for us to take this opportunity to acknowledge Stephen and Bob and CIN and the support they've given us over the years to our organization. And in fact, this is an even better opportunity for us to congratulate them on 20 years in the business. And I also want to point out that at our recent gala, we honored Stephen with the Jam-Pack Community Service Award in recognition for all his hard work and CIN's support of the diaspora's effort to make our country better over the years. So once again, Stephen, Bob, congrats. Thank you for your support. So in a few moments, Mr. Golding is going to talk about Jamaica's challenges and opportunities, and I'm sure you'll agree that the education of our children is as much an opportunity as it is a challenge. Right? And in true Jamaican spirit, Jam-Pack recognized the challenge and stepped up to the plate and got to work. We collected and distributed barrels to our various schools in Jamaica, helped fund tuition for many students, helped train some teachers, and so on. Boxes of computers. Every year we run a school supplies drive, and we ship all these things to Jamaica with the help of transcontinental shippers like the Queens, Bobby Sousa's, and other great support of the organization. And we do all of that with the help of our partners and donors and volunteers, many of which are in the room, many of the names I just called, which is great. But that's great. That's all in the past. We don't need to do big things like that in the past, right? So going forward, Jam-Pack is going to be working much more closely with the Early Childhood Commission in Jamaica and the National Education Trust to help schools get certified by the Ministry of Education, and this will help them have better access to government support, international support, and so on, both monetary and in kind, and really help put them on a sustainable path to educating our children. And this is a real investment in our country's future. Academic research shows that early childhood spending is one of the most productive capital outlays a country can make, right? It's more productive, high ROI, return on investment. Sorry, I'm a Wall Street guy speaking acronyms, forgive me. But it's a higher return on investment than building roads or laying broadband cable or that type of thing. And incidentally, even if you wanted to build a road, right, very few of us in the room have the 100 or so million to get that conversation started. I mean, some of you might, but I don't, and many of us don't. But you probably have the 120 it takes to send a child to school for a year, or the 500, or 1,000 it takes to help build a classroom, or fix a, or help educate some teachers. So we encourage you to link up with us and let's get this done. This is a real big deal for our country's future, and you can have real impact. right? By very small expenditures, support us with your time or with your money. And you can talk to me afterwards. Some of our board members are here. Go to our website, jampot.org, get on our mailing list. If you do Facebook, we're on that. If you do Twitter, we're on that. If you do LinkedIn, we're on that, right? Anything online you want to do, you can find us there. Or just send me an email and say, Dale, I want to give Jampat $10,000. And I'll gladly figure out how to help you get that to Jamaica. In the meantime, Mr. Golding is going to share some wonderful thoughts with us, and I personally can't wait to hear them. So thanks again, welcome, good to see you, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, Dale, for your important work, and from you and your colleagues at JAMPAC. Education is where the rubber hits the road. That's where the future is going to be made. So thank you for all that you do. One quick thank you to all of our friends here at the Schomburg Center. The Schomburg, as most of you know, is a wholly unique entity in all of America. As a public library, programs like this are commonplace here, but almost unheard of anyplace else in America. And the team at the Schomburg has welcomed us over the years and provided this space and this opportunity so that we can come together to talk about the important opportunities and the values that we share for the Caribbean. So please give Clarice and Kara and Lady Sasha and Dr. Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and in his absence, a round of applause. Our next speaker and important advertiser brings an important message about strengthening the economy. And I won't dare to even approach the topic on her behalf, but I will say this much. It is one that is central to economic development and one that is central to strengthening the economy of Jamaica. And although I just met Maureen Hayden Cater, I must say she's a sister with a lot of sizzle, and she has a very, very strong presence, and I believe that if the presence that I experience matches her acumen and her accomplishments in the boardroom, she's going to succeed with this project. So at this point, I would like to welcome Maureen Hayden Cater, President of First Global Bank.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. And yes, I'm a sponsor, but you know my heart is really full. I'm visiting, and it's really wonderful to see all of you come out for Jamaica. You know, and I listen to it. You know, you're not there, and yet you're thinking of us, and we're really very grateful for that. I just want to tell you a little bit about First Global Bank, and it's great to be in New York, and in fact it's great to be among Jamaicans in New York. And as a lot of you probably know, First Global Bank is a fully owned subsidiary of Grace Kennedy, you know, Grace Ketchup, right? You all know Grace Kennedy. And that, believe it or not, makes us 100% Jamaican-owned commercial bank. The only one. So, as a Jamaican bank, we feel it's important that we should share our products and services with all Jamaicans, those at home as well as Jamaicans living abroad. And I believe that we, as First Global Bank, have something to offer that you will find very, very relevant and very beneficial to all of you. So, for example, if you put your US dollars with First Global Bank in Jamaica, I won't use return on investment, I'll simply use the interest rate that you will gain is several times more than you can today get from any US bank. So for the first, it makes sense from just the financial perspective to actually have your savings in Jamaica in US dollars. So our bank, we take all currency, Jamaicans, local currency, foreign currency, whatever. But just let you know that it is in fact better in terms of your returns. But perhaps even more exciting is that we have a platform, and might I say award-winning, since we've won 3 international awards. We're beating all the other banks in Jamaica in terms of the platform we have. It's called Global Access. And this platform, it's what we stand on as our prize in First Global, because it allows you to live abroad and bank a yard. Okay. And there are no other banks in Jamaica that can offer this. So, let me give you an example. You can stay right here in New York and transfer money from your First Global account to any other commercial bank in Jamaica. Or, suppose your aunt banks with the Red Bank down in Westmoreland, and you have a First Global account. You can actually move money from your First Global account to that aunt's account in the Red Bank down in Westmoreland. And you can actually do wire transfers anywhere in the world. So just because you have your US dollars there, that doesn't mean you have to go down there and move your US dollars, no. You can stay right here. You can pay your bills in Jamaica. So I know a lot of us have houses. I just spoke to a gentleman who has his house down in Jamaica. JPS will cut off your light if you don't pay it just in time. You can do that on First Global Access. You can pay all your bills in Jamaica. If you have school fees to pay, you can pay staying right here, and we like to boast, in your nightie, in your bathroom, and pay your bills. You can do everything from here using Global Access. And so, tonight, in order to encourage you, of course you can't do any of this if you don't have a First Global account. So, in order to incentivize you to actually open a First Global account, we're giving you a gift of $25. It's a check, US. To open your account. And there's a young lady in the lobby, Antoinette. She's distributing them. She's doing a great job. Great job. You know, we got a girl from New York to do this. And in that little package, you will find your customer information form, a little bit more information on First Global, and your gift check for $25. We want you to sign the check, complete the form, and I was just explaining to someone in detail, yes, you need your bank reference, but you all have a bank account, so your bank will give you a reference, notarize it, and just send it down to us. And we'll open your account, and you can start moving funds from New York to Jamaica, from Jamaica to New York, from Jamaica, Kingston to Auntie at the Red Bank. But we don't suggest that, but just in case you want to help your auntie with the Red Bank, pay her light bill. So just to let you know, we're here, we have all the forms outside, and I guarantee you, if you take the time to come on board with First Global, you will definitely agree with me that it is possible to live abroad and bank a yard. Thank you for your time. Yeah. We're happy to be sponsors of the CIN Lecture Series, and I'm sure you're all keenly interested in what insights Mr. Golding is going to be offering us this evening. Thank you.
Now, Maureen, I want to repeat something I thought I heard you say. You said we can increase our earnings many, it was 3 minutes, right? Many times. Thank you, I just want to make sure I heard that. Okay. By the way, with Maureen is another good friend that I just met, Peter Lindo. We had dinner last night and chatted. He's a delightful gentleman, and he is also with First Global Bank. Please stand up, let us welcome you. Come on. You know, one of the great pleasures about the CIN Association is that you start to grow into an extended family with the supporters and advertisers and viewers over the years. And this next gentleman is a brother beloved that I see in all the right places. In addition to being a very long and loyal sponsor of CIN, he has deep roots in other parts of the community that I think cause all of us to love him greatly. His generosity and his skill and his intellect is just infectious. His family's involvement beyond the Golden Crust Caribbean Bakery and Grill includes scholarships for worthy students. He's very active in the community of faith. And now he adds to his many credits in life. He's a published author. And so at this point, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the gentleman who will introduce our speaker of the evening, Bruce Golden, Lowell Hawthorne, one of the loyal supporters of CIN and a great friend of all of ours. Lowell.
Thank you, Bob. Great commercial. To my good friend, Stephen Hill, the President and CEO of CIN Television, elected official, co-sponsors, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, pleasant good evening to you all. Let me once again commend the visionary Stephen Hill and his team at CIN for staging the 9th annual CIN Lecture Series. This event consistently seeks to address issues of relevant concern and importance to the Jamaican diaspora here in the United States. I congratulate you, Stephen, for the tremendous job. As I travel this great country over the many years, folks have always asked me, are you an investor in CIN? Because of the relationship and the number of commercials we have often run on the television series. But Steve, I want to let you know, I believe that the return on my investment is much greater being an advertiser by being a partner with you. Stephen Hill has created a tremendous brand for the Golden Cross organization over the last 20 years. We have never missed a beat with CIN. I love Stephen Hill dearly, but I don't believe it's because of the love that I have for him. I believe that because CIN works for Golden Cross. So I thank you for your partnership. I am honored to be given the privilege to welcome and introduce my friend who has remarkably impacted Jamaica, a man who declared himself chief servant of the people of Jamaica, a man whose passion, determination, and willingness allowed him to make extraordinary advances in the government of Jamaica. It is indeed my pleasure to join with CIN organization on behalf of all the sponsors to welcome the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honorable Bruce Golden, to New York, home of over 70 Golden Cross restaurants. Sir, if you're homesick, there are about 4 Golden Cross restaurants on this block. We have been very fortunate over the year to enjoy renowned speakers such as Ronnie Twait, Douglas Orain, and other experts who have shared key insight on an array of exciting and challenging topics. I'm always reminded of the privilege I had to speak on the topic of the importance of entrepreneurship and its contribution to wealth creation. It's a subject that still excites me to the very bone because it is through entrepreneurship that I have found financial liberty. This evening, CIN has added not only another great leader, but another baker to its repertoire. Some of you may not know the Honorable Bruce Golden is a baker like myself. Not only do we share this quality, but we share the crust. I have the golden crust. Mr. Golden and his wife, Lorna, had the honey crust. By the way, my wife's name is Lorna too. But before this becomes a discussion about who makes the better bread or the better bun, I can say there isn't a better individual to address tonight's topics, Jamaica's challenges, opportunities, and imperatives, than the Honorable Bruce Golden. This isn't just a topic for Mr. Golden, but it is his main focus during his time as Prime Minister, and I'm sure it still is. Let me move on to tell you more about this remarkable individual. I will try my very best to summarize his many accomplishments. As a young man, Honorable Golden began his journey to political success. At the early age of 24, he succeeded his father as Member of Parliament for West St. Catherine. 35 years of his life were spent in dedicated, impactful service in the Parliament of Jamaica. He held the position of Minister of Construction, Chairman of the United Nations Commission of Human Settlements, and founder and president of the National Democratic Movement, all while being a devoted husband and father of 3. Mr. Golden reached the pinnacle in his success when he was elected leader of Jamaica Labour Party in 2005 and then elected Jamaica's 8th Prime Minister in 2007. As Prime Minister, he stayed true to the promises he made in his inauguration speech. He reformed early childhood education, abolished tuition fees of all public secondary schools, and he increased the national minimum wage, among many other accomplishments. He was persistent in his effort to make sure that every child received a good education and every adult a decent job. Bruce Golden believes leadership is about the willingness to stand up for what you believe is right. And we have the honor of hearing him speak tonight. As we look towards a brighter future for Jamaica, we know we must discuss the challenges Jamaica faces, but then highlight the vast opportunities that are waiting. Mr. Golden has the experience, the drive, the determination, the discipline, and the passion to see Jamaica move forward, which is why it is my delight for him to speak on this topic. Need I say more? Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the presenter for tonight, the powerful, the passionate, the chief servant, one of Jamaica's finest political leaders, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honorable Bruce Golden.
All that Lowell needed to have done to better that was to have brought a piece of hot hard bread. Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, Bob. And good evening, everyone. Let me start by thanking Stephen and the CIN family for the gracious invitation that they extended to me to make the presentation at this year's lecture series. He knows I was a bit reluctant because I have been enjoying my retirement and my 4 grandchildren give me all the satisfaction that I want. But I want to thank him for the invitation. I want to thank the sponsors as well, without whom, of course, this would not have been possible. Maureen did such a good job in promoting First Global that it needs no endorsement, but I can tell you as a satisfied customer of First Global Bank, I commend the bank to you. Let me tell you a story. I carry a First Global credit card, in addition to some other credit cards. I don't have one from the Red Bank. But on 1 or 2 occasions when I travel and I attempt to use other cards, I run into a problem. And it's not for lack of fun. I normally have to call the bank and then I'm told, well, since you have used the card for so long, we have put something on the card. Or I'm told that it's a computer glitch. I've never had to call First Global when I go abroad and I present their card. I'm a satisfied customer. I'd like as well to thank all of you who have honored me by being here. I really want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank as well those vocal individuals on the outside of the building who thought that my presence here this evening was sufficiently important for them to also be here. And I want to thank them for that. While we were interacting in the lobby, a number of persons who I spoke with gave me their opinions as to what they think I was going to speak about this evening, beyond just the broad topic of our challenges and opportunities and imperatives. When I'm done, I think some of them may be surprised. I hope none of them is bored. I hope all of you will be challenged. Let me put the remarks that I want to make in some context. Over these past few weeks, most of you, or many of you, would have held your breath, maybe even wrung your hands, as the budget crisis in Washington unfolded and the US stared down the barrel of default. And much of the focus, certainly in terms of the news that I watched, has been on the bickering that goes on between the White House and the Congress and within the Congress itself, and of course the flashpoint issue of Obamacare. And that has tended to obscure what I think is the fundamental issue that faces the American people. And that is the fact that for a long time, the federal government has been spending more than it earns. And in the process, it has accumulated a huge debt that threatens the well-being of present and future generations. In that broad respect, there are some interesting parallels between the dilemma that's gripping the United States and that which is facing us in Jamaica. We are both living beyond our means. We are both spending more than we earn. Over the last 20 years, the US government has recorded a budget surplus in only 4 years. In the case of Jamaica, over the last 20 years, we have recorded a budget surplus in only 3 years. The US debt has quadrupled over this 20-year period. The Jamaican debt over the last 20 years has similarly quadrupled. The debt to GDP ratio in the US is over 100%, as is the case in Jamaica. Albeit, the US is 103%, ours is a whopping 140%. And if we look, we can even find similarities in the hostility shown by one political party to the other. It happens in Jamaica, it happens in America. But the similarities pretty much end there. The United States is still the world's largest economy. Twice the size of China, despite China's rapid growth in recent times, and equivalent in size to all of the countries that make up the European Union. So that despite all of the trouble that it is having, the US is still the most powerful economy in the world. It holds the reserve currency of the world. Its treasury bills and other securities form the backbone of the global financial system. And US debt instruments remain a highly sought after commodity. The United States, to put it simply, like General Motors and JP Morgan, is just too big to be allowed to fail. Jamaica is not in that league. We're a small speck in a vast ocean with a population that is less than that of Nevada and a per capita income that is just 10% of the per capita income in the United States. And because of this, when we talk about sensitive statistics like poverty, we speak in different languages. America estimates that 15% of its people live below the poverty line. In Jamaica, we estimate that over 20% of our people live below the poverty line. But what is the poverty line? In the US, the poverty line is $63 a day. In Jamaica, the poverty line is $3.50 a day. So if you were to apply the US standard to Jamaica, about 95% of the people in Jamaica would be below America's poverty line. So our symptoms may be similar, may even be identical, but the relative scale and the seriousness of what afflicts us, not the same. The root problems are vastly different. The range of options open to us, very unequal. The pain we must endure, both from what ails us and from what can cure us, is not in any way comparable. I want to spend just a few minutes taking a clinical look at the realities that confront us in Jamaica. And I want to stay within that 20-year framework. The figures I'm going to give you are US dollars. And I'm doing that deliberately because I want to avoid the distortion that would result if we were to speak in two different currencies. Because we have had currency changes over these 20 years. Do you know, for example, that over that 20-year period, the Jamaican dollar, in relation to the US dollar, has lost 79% of its value? That's the level of depreciation that has taken place in those 20 years. So we need to bring the numbers together. And what I've done is to take the figures for each year, convert the Jamaican dollars for that year based on what the exchange rate was in that year, the average exchange rate for that year, so that we can be comparing apples with apples. Now, over that 20-year period, the total amount of revenue that the Jamaican government has collected. And by revenue, I mean all of the taxes that we collect. The customs duties, the income tax, the GCT, the telephone tax, everything. Plus the grants that we get from friendly countries such as America, countries in Europe and so on. All of that revenue over those 20 years come up to $51 billion. Remember, I'm talking US dollars now. 51 billion. I want you to note that figure carefully because of what I'm going to follow up and say. We have collected in taxes and grants 51 billion. But over that 20-year period, and here is the rub, we have had to spend 52 billion to pay the principal and interest on the debt that we owe. So over that 20-year period, we have actually had to pay out more to service our debt than all of the taxes and revenues that we collect. Do you know what this means? It means that before we can pay one teacher or provide one school lunch, before we can put one bottle of aspirin in a hospital, before we can fix one pothole, before we can put 1 gallon of petrol in a police patrol car, before we can send out 1 pension check, we have to borrow. So we have borrowed and borrowed, and we have buried ourselves under this mountain of debt. We have plunged ourselves in a deep hole of despair. And therefore we're just not able to spend the amount of money that we need to spend, that all governments of Jamaica want to spend on critical things like education and health and security and infrastructure. The very things that we need to spend on if we are to become, as we proclaim in Vision 2030, if we are to become the place of choice to live, work, raise your families and do business. I want to give you some stark comparisons because we have to put all of this in context. You know, in the United States, you hear the constant discussion about the failing education system and the need for America to spend more on education. You hear the concern about the availability of health care, and that has led to President Obama's signature domestic policy, Obamacare. But let us look at some numbers. The United States currently spends on education annually $11,000 per student. 11,000 US dollars. In Jamaica, we spend 932 US dollars. The US currently spends on health care $8,600 per capita annually. In Jamaica, we can just find 136 US dollars per capita per annum. On Social Security, the United States currently spends $1,650 per capita. In Jamaica, we spend $72 per capita. I don't know what the US spends on law enforcement and the justice system because those expenditures are scattered over the federal, state, and city levels, and I couldn't find anywhere in my research where all of those were brought together. So I don't know what the US spends on law enforcement and justice, but I know that in Jamaica, we spend annually $146 per capita. I haven't come here this evening to cast blame or to point fingers because there is enough blame to go all around. And we don't have enough fingers to point the blame. Over the last 20 years, the Jamaican economy has grown by only 10%. Over 20 years, by only 10%. So that anybody who is being up front. We have to recognize that we have made many mistakes. We have missed many opportunities that some of them come but once. Looking back and pointing fingers won't help. Won't help us with the challenges that we must confront. Although it is important to recognize those mistakes so that we don't make them again. The question that some of you, having listened to me so far, may ask is, are we a lost cause? My answer to that is no. Can we get out of this paralysis? Yes, we can. The experience of other countries tell us that it can be done. You take countries like Angola, Cambodia, Kosovo, Mozambique, Rwanda, Uganda, even Cuba. Despite the unjust and unjustifiable United States embargo. These are countries whose economies were ravaged by war and oppression, but now are on a steady growth path with moderate debt ratios, increasing productivity, and rising incomes. Is it going to be easy? No, not by a long shot. Remember what Benjamin Franklin said? No pain, no gain. How do we go about fixing this problem? I think the first thing is that we have to recognize that the options that are open to us are severely limited and diminishing steadily. We are more and more boxed into a corner. There are some countries which are defined by the World Bank under this rubric, highly indebted poor countries, HIPIC, who benefited from a debt relief program coordinated by the World Bank and the IMF in 1996. These countries were required to undertake structural reform, but because of that, and because of the relief that they obtained, where all of their external debt, multilateral and bilateral, was written off at a cost of some $74 billion US. These countries were then able, freed as they were from this burden of debt service, they were able to pursue development strategies and expenditure that gave new energy to their economy. And although they still have a far way to go, they are now enjoying unprecedented levels of growth. Jamaica was not eligible to benefit from that program because the same World Bank classifies Jamaica. Many of you won't believe it after you heard the poverty numbers that I gave you. But we are classified by the World Bank as a as an upper middle income economy. And therefore we were not eligible to benefit from that program. In fact, of the 36 countries that benefited, only 2 were from the Caribbean, Haiti and Guyana. Furthermore, most of our debt is commercial debt. I mean, we do have multilateral debt, we have, like the World Bank and the IDB. We have bilateral debt, we owe American money, we owe England money. But the majority of our debt, and this is a change that has taken place over that 20-year period, the majority of our debt is owed to commercial lenders, like the banks. And the banks, as you know, are persons who manage money that belongs to savers and investors. So the banks can't countenance writing off debt because it's other people's money that they are responsible for. So that kind of support and bailout simply was not open to us. Our small size, the small size of our economy and our population and our country is also a country. If you look at countries like Brazil and South Africa and Indonesia, just to name a few, They are able to use their domestic economy to drive their domestic market, to drive their economies, and then to develop the efficiencies and the competitiveness there to be able now to tackle the rest of the world. Our economy is just too small to support the level of investment and the innovation, to develop the synergies that would enable us to become efficient and competitive. Take Lowell Hawthorne, for example. There is no way that Lowell would have been able to establish the empire that he has of 120 outlets, bakeries, in 9 states. He couldn't build that 120 outlet empire if he were confined to operate between Negril and Moran Point. We just couldn't hold, the market just couldn't support that level of investment and that level of activity. Jamaica, the reason why I mention this is because I think it's important for us to understand that Jamaica's hopes for success, for fortune, have to be forged in the rawness and the ferociousness of a global market that takes no prisoners. It's a market that is ruthless and unkind, but that is where we are going to have to go and build our future. I pose a question, how then, given all of these constraints and given the narrowness of these options, how then do we find the right fix? Now let us fast forward and see what has happened in recent times. Cornered as we were by this mountain of debt, this burden of debt service, and further damaged by the recession. Do you know, for example, that as a result of the recession, 3 of our 4 alumina plants were shut down. Now, bauxite and alumina account for 50% of our merchandise export. 50% of what we put on ships and planes and sell abroad is bauxite and alumina. Now, when 3/4 of your bauxite and alumina output just shuts down on you, you must understand the impact that that has on the economy. That was what greeted me when I came to office. I came to office in 2007. And by 2008, the recession started to take its toll. Now, cornered as we were, and faced with this aggravation of our difficulties by the global recession, we really had no choice but to seek IMF support. And you know, there's nothing embarrassing about this. Sturdy economies, erstwhile sturdy economies like Ireland and Greece and Turkey and even Spain have had to turn to the IMF. The extended fund facility, which the government signed earlier this year in April, following on the stalled standby agreement that my administration had signed in 2010, was greeted at home and throughout the international financial market with a huge sigh of relief. Almost as if, thank God we are saved. I want to caution against the belief held by some, held by many, and in fact articulated by the multilateral agencies. This argument goes like this, that if you stick to your guns and you are able to meet all of the commitments that are stipulated under the IMF program, we will finally, for the first time at last, be on the road to economic recovery and sustained growth. It seems to me that it is being contended that fiscal consolidation, which is the sort of the new term of art in the IMF discussion, that fiscal consolidation, which essentially means cutting back your expenditure, increasing your revenue collection, and reducing your debt, that will ensure economic growth in the medium to long term. And therefore, under the program, we have committed ourselves to achieve and maintain a primary surplus of 7.5% starting immediately, to eliminate the fiscal deficit within 2 years, and to reduce the debt to GDP ratio, which is now 140%, to reduce that to 96% over the next 6 years. The difficulty I have with this construct is that it has internal, inherent contradictions that while they cannot be eliminated, they have to be countered if the program is to succeed. Put another way, the conditions which the IMF program imposes, left by themselves, will be impediments to investment and growth. When a country's expenditure is so constricted that it cannot effectively tackle crime and violence, cannot maintain and improve infrastructure, cannot develop a workforce with the necessary education and competencies, the conditions that need to exist for investment and job creation and growth to take place will remain, to borrow Emperor Haile Selassie's term, a fleeting illusion. I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not making this as a criticism of the government, because the government had little room in which to wriggle. Nor am I making this as a criticism of the IMF. I want you to listen to me carefully. Because you have to understand what the mandate of the IMF was, as outlined in 1947, the year I was born. Let us understand clearly that the IMF is primarily concerned with financial stability. And let me express that another way. The IMF is primarily concerned, not just in relation to Jamaica, but with most other countries, concerned with our ability to pay our external bills and to repay our external debt, so that the smooth working of the global financial and trading system is not disturbed. That is its mandate, that's its mission. Economic growth, especially in the case of countries like Jamaica, whose growth or lack of growth has no impact whatsoever on the global economy. That is not the IMF's overriding priority. That it leaves to us to look about. What we are required to do under the IMF agreement, necessary though it is, and I don't want to be misunderstood, I'm not saying that these commitments should not have been made. I just want us to understand the implications of those commitments, so that the conditions set out in the IMF agreement are necessary. And you'll never hear me raising any criticism of Dr. Peter Phillips or the government for having entered into an agreement with those stated commitments. What I'm trying to say is that they are necessary but not sufficient. For while they speak to the conditions necessary to allow growth to take place, they do not embody the proactive steps that are required to make that growth happen. One is to allow, another is to stimulate. The challenge that faces the government, therefore, indeed the challenge that faces all of us, is not just the business of passing quarterly IMF tests, but how to generate growth while pursuing a constrictive, growth passive fiscal policy as required under the IMF program. As I suggested recently, when I addressed the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce Awards banquet, we have to go beyond the IMF agreement. We have to be not just IMF compliant, we have to be IMF plus. And I want to explain what I mean. But here again, you see the vast dissimilarity between the United States and countries like Jamaica. In the face of the global crisis, the US government, for example, through the Federal Reserve Board, has continued to pursue an expansionary, stimulus-oriented program designed to keep the fire of economic activity burning until it is robust enough to sustain itself. And it has done so at a huge cost. The United States debt has moved from $9 trillion to $17 trillion since the recession started at the beginning of 2008. We in Jamaica, we can't do that. We don't have the resources or the strength of currency to do that. You know, the donkey had some profound words to say about the topography of the world. And he said to us that it's not level. So when I speak about having to be not just IMF compliant, but IMF plus, what do I mean? I suggest that we begin by identifying what are the binding constraints to investment in Jamaica. Because without investment, there can be no sustainable job creation and no sustained growth. The binding constraints that relate to our macroeconomic fundamentals, like our debt ratios and our fiscal imbalance, those are already being attended to under the IMF program. What we must do now is that we must devote equal attention to those that exist within the real economy. And I want to identify those that I think are so important that we have to take them, put them on our radar and deal with them. One of them, of course, is one that is dear to the heart of many of you. And there was discussion about it here before. Education and training. Investments are no longer driven by the availability of cheap labor. The technology has gone way beyond that. Investments are now driven by the availability of competent labor. Our approach back home, our approach to education is not market driven. Our school system is like a mass production factory, running a conveyor belt, defined more by the distance that is traveled than by the quality of the product that comes off at the end. It's an issue that is one of our binding constraints. Crime and violence. Investment shies away from places where normal business activity has to contend with violent crime. Costly provisions for extraordinary security have no place in business forecasting or feasibility studies. Not in a competitive market, not in this kind of global market that we have to compete in, where an unnecessary dollar in your costing can push you out of the market altogether. Thirdly, the hassle that people go through to do business in Jamaica. You know, when we speak of the ease of doing business, you know, that's not just a cliche. It is a defining issue in the decisions that investors make. The World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index for 2013 ranks Jamaica as 90th out of 185 countries, which means that if the question of how easy it is to do business becomes the toss-up issue in an investor's decision, there are 89 countries that will be more attractive to him than Jamaica. Fourthly, our infrastructure. Modern, efficient infrastructure. The road network, telecommunications, our air and sea ports, transportation, the availability of good potable water. All of that is critical in attracting investment, and I don't think I need to elaborate on that. And then finally, in terms of what I consider to be the binding constraints, the question of energy. Jamaica's electricity cost is 4 times that of Canada. 3.5 times that of the United States. And equivalent to Denmark, which is supposed to have the most expensive electricity in the world. If we had no other major impediments, might be we would be able to live with that. But with other issues impacting negatively on our investment decisions, on the investment decisions that people make, this one has to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Now, I've identified what I consider to be the 5 binding constraints. I haven't set them out in any particular order of priority because I consider them to be all priorities. There are other issues that I know might come to your mind. The creaking justice system, poor housing, the overburdened healthcare system, bad environmental practices. I feel that important though these are, my focus is on those issues that constitute the binding constraint to the flow of investment that is necessary to create the jobs, generate the growth that we need. Get those 5 areas fixed, and we will have the capacity to fix the others. The question I'm sure that some of you will ask is, given all that I have said about our limited capability and resources, where are we to find the capacity, both in terms of attention and focus, as well as in terms of the resources to address these issues? I will respond this way. We will have to not only ride and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to light a candle and direct traffic while we ride and chew gum. A nation that is at war has to redefine its priorities, refocus itself, and reallocate what resources it has. When a nation is at war, the soldiers who are fighting that war on behalf of that nation are fed before everybody else. That's why when there were shortages of things when Britain was in World War II, but the soldiers were well looked after. They had to be, they were fighting a war. We better understand that we are at war, not with any other nation, but we are at war with the poverty and development deficit that has plagued us for too long. And therefore we need to take some tough, deliberate decisions. Let's look back at those 5 areas of what I call binding constraints. And let me outline how I think we ought to approach it. I depicted our education system as a conveyor belt that spits out more rejects than quality assured products. And the evidence is there. If you look at our economic social survey report, you will see that 74% of our labor force is unskilled. That's what the report says, although I think to be more specific, they do not have a certified skill set. They may have 3 or 4 CXC subjects, but they're not skilled in terms of any particular work to be performed at a workplace. The mantra of the Ministry of Education, and it has been so for a long time, is, and it rings so nicely, every child can learn and every child must learn. And you know, it is a noble objective, but the fact of the matter is that some children learn better than others. I suggest that we take a deliberate approach. Identify those students who show the capacity to develop their potential. And you don't have to go employ no foreign consultants to identify them. They identify themselves by their performance. And I say, do not hold them back in the path of underachievement. Create and support a dedicated path for them to acquire the skills and certification that is needed to attract the attention of potential investors, so that when you try to get investors to come to your country, you can say to them that, look, we have the skilled workers that you need. You don't have to go to India. You don't have to go to these places because we have them ready to roll, bring investment up. The approach I suggest has to be market driven. Our curriculum and training programs, the allocation of student loans, cannot continue to be oblivious of what the market wants and is prepared to pay good dollars for. Plus, to be brutally honest and frank, we do not need a labor force that is 100% skilled and certified. If we had a labor force that is 100% skilled and certified, we would not know what to do with them. We couldn't absorb them, we'd have to export them. We don't need more than half that number to drive a level of economic activity that would generate sufficient jobs for the other half. Robust economic activity creates a huge demand for low-skilled and unskilled labor, just as Singapore, where they have to import labor to deal with the lower-level job because Singaporeans are just too highly trained to do those jobs. Some people will call this discrimination. I call it prioritization. We are at war, we must be prepared to fight that war. I come now to the question of one of the other binding constraints, question of crime and violence. 3 to 4 murders a day in a population of less than 3 million makes Jamaica a frightening place in which to invest. Reducing crime is not something that, to borrow the tagline from Kentucky Fried Chicken back home, we can be content to be working on it. We have to fix it. And our efforts must be so demonstrable and result-proven that investors will be confident that we mean business. We will never get consensus. I want to say this with all the seriousness that I can muster. We will never get consensus on the strategies to be employed. The balance that must be observed between hard policing and community policing, between social intervention and the appropriate use of force. Some of the alternative approaches that are being suggested by human rights groups and others back home are costly. If reducing crime is to await the day when our debt service obligation will allow us to allocate the resources needed to do so, that day, I submit, will never come. Policing strategies must conform to the Charter of Rights which we promulgated in 2010. The Independent Commission of Investigation, which was established in 2010, to hold police and prison officials accountable for any human rights breaches, that must be supported. But the police cannot be epitomized as a villain to be harassed and intimidated to the point where they are too demoralized and disinspired to do the job that they are required to do. Much of the crime that we have in Jamaica, based on the reports coming out of the police, is gang-related. There are many states in the United States. There is Canada, there is Australia, there is the United Kingdom, that have found it necessary to introduce specific laws to deal with criminal gangs. During my term in office, we started work on legislation, and I'm pleased that the present government has now taken that legislation to Parliament to provide a special regime for dealing with the suppression of criminal gangs and organizations. But the objections have already been mounted. You know, we in Jamaica always seem to want to have our cake even after we have eaten it up. One of the requirements of governments, particularly in this time of crisis, is decisiveness, and I will return to that before I close. Another binding constraint I mentioned was bureaucracy. Doing business in Jamaica has always been riddled with red tape. You know, we make this mistake of believing that the way to keep the playing field level and to deter corruption is to lay out tedious processes and requirements. In fact, it has the opposite effect. it breeds corruption, since that is seen as the easiest way to avoid the headaches. Dr. Peter Phillips was perfectly right. In Jamaica, the man who plays by the rules is the man who gets shafted, because your competitor is doing a deal and is beating you to the market because you're there trying to see if you can be a good citizen and comply with the law. I think the problem stems from the fact that in Jamaica, we operate in a spirit of mutual mistrust. Governments don't trust the people. We believe that everyone is potentially crooked, and therefore we must institute measures to prevent crooked behavior. And the people don't trust the government because they believe that these tedious measures that we have put in place are designed to keep out some and let in others. So they feel justified in finding ways to beat the system because they're just redressing what they see as an imbalance. In the end, many things that could get done don't get done. Many investments that might have been made go elsewhere. Many jobs that could have been created are robbed from us. I want to suggest two things. Firstly, government has a critical role to provide oversight and to regulate. And nobody can do that but the government. But there are two approaches that you can take. One is to lay out these tedious procedures that must be complied with. In Jamaica, we believe that we must not only put on belt and braces, we must put straight jacket on as well. That's one approach. The other approach is to put in place effective mechanisms to hold accountable those persons who break the rules. What we are trying to do in Jamaica is that we want to do both. So we put in place the tedious measures. We put in place the anti-corruption mechanisms, such as the Office of Contractor General, which is supposed to hold people to account. But we still maintain the tedious processes that people must go through for the simplest of transactions. I suggest that we adopt a completely different approach. Make the rules as simple and straightforward as possible. Lay down the rules. And then shift the focus now on holding accountable those who flout those simple, straightforward rules. Secondly, I suggest that the government, in a joint effort with the private sector, examine as a matter of urgency the main areas of red tape that hamper business. Review every form that has to be filled out, every approval that has to be sought, every stamp that has to be affixed. Eliminate those that we can do without. Simplify those, even revolutionary. But once you take that approach, you simplify it at the front end, but you monitor it and enforce it at the back end. Once you take that approach, then you let those who would still be inclined to be corrupt know that they will need not only a lawyer, but they will need somebody to look after their family while they're away. I want to give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. When I was in office, I gave a commitment to address this question of building approval, because most investments that take place involve some element of building, either directly or indirectly. And I gave a commitment that we were to try to streamline the process so that when somebody wants to put up a building, you submit your plans, and if in 90 days you don't get a response, if you are not told that you cannot proceed because of reasons 1, 2, 3, after the 90 days, go ahead and build. We failed to achieve that because we ran into horrendous problems with the legal instruments that would have to be changed. There were some 12 different laws, some of them dating back to the early 1990s, by early 19th century. And the work to get rid of them to amend them, to eliminate what, it was just overwhelming and we didn't get there. We did make some improvements. As far as the National Environment and Planning Agency is concerned, we got them up to a rate of, I think, between 95 and 97% completion within the 90 days, but we had problems at the local authority level. That was another problem we faced because the parish councils were resisted this approach because it was in fact, from their point of view, taking away some of their power. One of the things that we did when I was in office as well is that we did considerable work on establishing a national building code for Jamaica. And the work was almost complete. Again, I'm pleased. I heard that the Minister of Local Government announced a week or two ago that he's hoping to have final legislation brought to Parliament before the end of the year. What this will do is that it will give you, for the first time, a national codified set of standards to govern the construction of any kind of building, whether you're talking about a little two-bedroom house or a 18-story commercial building. Once you have that, I'm suggesting to the government, let us radically change the business now of building approval. Matter of fact, let us eliminate this business about approval. You have the codes. You say to developers, those are the rules. See the specifications there. That is what you must conform. Then if you want to do a project, you don't apply. You deposit your plans, file your plans. And you will be told exactly what sort of plans you must file, your engineering, this and whatever. You file your plans. And if the agency does not object, then they will have to state cogent reasons for objecting. Within that 90-day period, come day 91, you start construction. You're not seeking approval, and you have notified, this is what I plan to do. And I plan to start that on day 91. Now, if, having got to that point, if you put up a building that breaches the codes as set out in that building code, which is available for everybody, then understand that you're going to be held accountable. You may be fined. If the breach is egregious enough, you may have to have the building demolished. But for God's sake, don't have an investor and an investment hanging around for 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years, awaiting approval for something that can create 150, 200 jobs and help Jamaica get out of the hole that it is in. We need to think differently. On the question of infrastructure, we do not now have and will not in the near future be able to find the resources to maintain and develop our infrastructure to the level required by a modern or even emerging economy. More creative ways can be found to bring private capital to move these critical areas forward. And thankfully, and I must acknowledge, that we are already embarked on that road. The Sandster Airport, for example, was privatized. I think that we should move to do the same thing with the Norman Manley Airport in Kingston. Efforts are now being made to privatize, because if we don't privatize them, it is we that have to find the money to undertake the capital works and the improvements and the expansion that has to take place from time to time. Efforts are now being made to privatize the Kingston Container Terminal. I think we must do the same with the management and further development of the Port of Kingston. Highway 2000 was privatized from the outset, but in a way that incurred huge financial liabilities for the government. During the time that I was in office, Minister Mike Henry started negotiations with China Engineering Company, a big Chinese firm, owned by the government of China, it's a Chinese government firm, for the development of the north-south corridor, that highway that is to link the north coast with the south coast. And we negotiated it on a basis where government would only have to find the land, most of which government already owns. Some of it is private that government would have to acquire. I am pleased that the government, Dr. Omar Davis is the minister responsible, is committed to the project, and they have in fact signed a preliminary agreement, and I'm hopeful that that project will come to fruition. I mentioned these things, and I just want to mention an aside. I know that there was disappointment, indeed even anger. There were placard bearers, I know, in London, and I believe in some parts of New York, when we took the decision, and I was principally responsible for it, to divest Air Jamaica. This piece of Jamaica that flies, people thought it's part of the patrimony that you're getting rid of. But the truth of the matter is, it was costing us 10 million US per month. That's $1 billion Jamaican dollars, over $1 billion Jamaican dollars a month to keep it flying. And can you imagine what would be the position if we had not divested it? Where would this government, with the problems that it now faces, be able to find that 10 million US dollars a month to keep it going? And yet, we can see the benefit of when government pulls back from certain things and concentrates on those things that government need to do and that only government can do. I flew up here on Monday on this new airline, Fly Jamaica. And they did not ask me to give them any promotion. But I was very impressed and I was very pleased with the quality of the service, quality of the food. It reminded me of the old Air Jamaica that we used to know. I hope that they do well. There are other areas that we can involve the private sector in. Important sections of the road network, the supply of water, they can be packaged to attract private investment. The last of these binding constraints where I want to offer some suggestions has to do with energy. The government is now embarking on negotiations with the second preferred bidder to provide 360 megawatts of new generating capacity. They became the preferred bidder because the first preferred bidder failed to put up the 1% bond that was required. You go through a process where you separate the big boys from the small boys. The fact that the bid invitation failed to attract any company with proven track record in the business of energy development, I find worrisome. But the government is now legally obliged to pursue the negotiations, and time will tell whether they will be concluded and whether the project will be successfully delivered. But in my view, we have misled ourselves by the exaggerated expectation that we have allowed to build up as to how much reduction in the high price of electricity the project will yield. A major part of our electricity cost is the inefficiency that exists in our generating equipment, which is, much of it is pretty much obsolete. If you put in new generators, even if you use the same expensive oil that we are now using, you're going to produce savings. But I doubt that this can be as much as the 30% that has been touted. The price differential between oil and natural gas, in my view, is not sufficient to generate huge savings far beyond that which can be obtained by just improving your generating processes. It is my view that Jamaica's only hope of any real dramatic reduction in electricity costs depends on our chances of identifying our own sources of energy. And in that regard, the geological data that we have acquired over the years is very encouraging. I've seen some of the figures that have been put together by the preliminary studies that have been done. And quite frankly, if you look at the seismic characteristics of the contiguous seabed around Jamaica and look at where oil and gas have already been found and are being exploited, there is good reason to feel that we have some of it too. The precise quantities and the commercial viability will of course have to be determined through appropriate agreements with exploration companies, because we don't have the money to go and do the exploration on our own. But you can negotiate arrangements where they will get some of the, if they go down there and they find the oil or gas, they get some, government retains some. But until we find ourselves in a position where we have some control over our own domestically sourced energy, which will then put us in a position where we can do what Trinidad does. And what Trinidad does is to say, no, we have oil, we have gas, we want our country to develop, and therefore we're prepared to make that energy available to our producers here at a determined price that will make them competitive in the market. That is when we're going to be able to really put our economy in such a position where the cost of the electricity can become part of our competitive advantage rather than being at the hindrance that it is now. So I suggest to you that we need to address these 5 binding constraints, and we need to do so with the same determination and commitment that we are giving to the quantitative and policy targets that are mandated under the IMF agreement. The IMF targets are one wheel of the bicycle. Fixing these 5 binding constraints will provide the other wheel that we must have if we are to move forward instead of continuing just to balance on one wheel. In doing so, and notwithstanding the sparsity of the options that are open to us, there are opportunities that we must grasp and exploit to the maximum. Our greatest asset is our people. Nowhere is that greatness better demonstrated than in the power of our name, the Jamaica brand. It is personified in Marcus Garvey, in Usain Bolt, in Shelley and Fraser. It is defined in our music, in our athletic achievements, in our Blue Mountain Coffee. Many countries struggle to put themselves on the world map. To be a name that people recognize and associate with. We are already on the map, but we have not found a way to translate the power of that presence into the investment and jobs and improved living standards that it has the potential to deliver. As I said earlier, our market is just too small to stimulate or sustain the kind of robust economic activity that we must have. We have to penetrate the global market. We perhaps will never be mass producers requiring huge markets. We don't have to be. We don't need a huge shop in the market. What we need are stalls strategically located where the shoppers are. Do you know that 1/10 of 1% of the world market would be sufficient to put every Jamaican to work and even cause us to have to import labor? 1/10 of 1% of the global market. But penetrating that market is not an easy matter. A handful of local companies like Grace Kennedy and Ray Neville have been able to establish themselves on a modest level. Doing so requires resources and it requires clout that are beyond the capacity of even most large Jamaican companies. Our access to the US market under CBI through President Reagan, to Canada under CARICAN, and to Europe under EPA has not yielded any significant benefits because our export infrastructure and capacity are weak. This challenge requires a strategic partnership between the government and the private sector. Consular functions that are performed by missions abroad, especially in places like New York, Tri-State, where we have a large concentration of Jamaicans, will have to be maintained. But apart from that, Our overseas missions, which spend a lot of time in the practice of diplomacy, must be refocused and appropriately staffed to be a part of a machinery to build a platform for putting our goods and services in every market that can be found. JAMPRO too must be revitalized and refocused, and can be the government's part of that joint venture with the private sector to seek out, penetrate and develop the markets where our goods and services can be sold and where the Jamaica brand instinctively attracts attention. And you know, in doing that, we don't need anyone to teach us how to do it. We have proven experts in promoting our tourism in the global market. And that's a global market that is fiercely competitive with hundreds of destinations across the globe that compete with us for those tourists. And yet we bring over 3 million tourists to Jamaica each year. In that instance, we are bringing the market to the product. We can replicate that expertise in terms of our goods and other services to take the product to the market. I do not by any stretch of the imagination suggest that pursuing these initiatives is going to be easy. I said before, it's going to be painful. But the pain is already upon us. What is the point in hiding from the dentist when you already have the toothache? It is going to require us to make hard choices, harder than we have ever had to make. Redirecting our education program to advance those who can become the vanguard for attracting investment and achieving high levels of productivity will require additional resources. Strengthening our efforts to curb violent crime will require additional resources. Getting our goods and services on the map, where the Jamaica brand already has its banner, but very little on its shelves, will require additional resources. If we are to comply with the IMF agreement, we will not be able to find those additional resources over and above what we currently have access to. They have to come from reallocating what resources we currently have. And I want to suggest we must stop shying away from some of these tough decisions that have to be made. We must stop shying away, for example, from the restructuring of the public sector that is outlined in the Master Rationalization Plan, which I took to Parliament, I think it was in May of 2011. There are government programs and agencies that can be merged and need to be merged. Some government programs will have to be curtailed, suspended, and some of them will even have to be abandoned. The IMF requires us to reduce the public sector wage bill to 9% of GDP in 2 years, I think it is. 3 years. That cannot be achieved merely by freezing wages. Not in the absence of significant GDP growth, which is not likely to happen by itself. It has to be augmented by reducing the size of the public sector through restructuring, attrition, and yes, through retrenchment where that is necessary. None of this, my friends, none of this is going to be popular. Indeed, it will be decidedly unpopular. But no one up to now has been able to proffer any credible alternative. Clearing the deck so that we can see our way, to be able to navigate our way forward, will not happen by chance. It will not come about by simply sticking to the IMF agreement. We have to bite the bullet. And by biting the bullet, I don't mean just closing our lips on the bullet. We have to put it in our teeth and bite it. We have been afraid to do that and are willing to do that for so long. And we must not flinch. I'll give you an example. The cost of government pensions, money that government has to pay out each year in pensions to civil servants, teachers, policemen, you name it, and politicians. You name it. The cost of government pensions has doubled in the last 3 years. and is likely to double again in the next 3 years. This is a burden that the government cannot continue to bear alone. Before I left office, Minister Shaw, then Minister of Finance, presented to Parliament a pension reform plan that would now require every public sector worker to contribute to his own pension through salary deductions. I was surprised, because I don't know how they could have afforded to do it, when I learned that that plan had been deferred for 3 years. It was a concession extracted from the government by the unions as a condition for the unions accepting the wage freeze. The government flinched. I'll give you another example. The Minister of Education, Reverend Ronnie Thwaites, sought recently to modify some of the entitlements to which teachers have become accustomed. Paid study leave, to be precise. And he sought to do so on the basis that we could no longer afford it, if indeed we were ever able to afford it. Expectedly, this was fiercely resisted by the teachers in a very strident way. One of the leaders of the Teachers Association referred to the impasse between themselves and the minister as a fight between puss and mongrel dog. Another of the leaders declared that Minister Thwaites was behaving like somebody on cocaine. And you know what was disappointing? That the government, perhaps mindful of the political clout that the teachers wield, the government, instead of backing up the minister, sought to give reassurance to the teachers. It wasn't long after that that Minister Thwaites apologized to the teachers for any offense his articulation of the position might have caused. The government flinched again. There are more flinch points to come, especially as we get closer to the next elections. The question is, can we afford to continue flinching? In these difficult circumstances, the path that we must travel, the journey we must take, the even greater pain we must bear, require extraordinary leadership. But it also requires extraordinary followership. One that recognizes that these problems are not just the government's problems, they are our problems, all of us. That followership has a duty to understand the issues, what is at stake, what our options are, and the greater hopelessness that awaits us if we try to find the easy way out. I cite for you an example. Take the country called Latvia in Eastern Europe, part of the old Soviet Union. Latvia was badly damaged by the recession. Its economy shrunk in, I think, a year or a little over a year. Its economy shrunk by 25%. Far worse than even we in Jamaica. Its unemployment rose within 2 years from 9% to 23%. What did the government do? They cut public sector jobs by 15%. They cut public sector pay by 18%. They imposed new taxes. They increased social security salary deductions, and they put a cap on social security benefits. And within 2 years, the economy rebounded to the point where Latvia is now the fastest growing economy in Europe. And you know what is interesting? In the midst of all of this, they had an election and the government was re-elected with a stronger majority. What makes the Latvian people any smarter than we are? The Jamaican people have access to too much information at a fingertip. Not to be able to sift sense from nonsense, to sift the wheat from the chaff. They can and must recognize and eschew the glib rhetoric that politicians, and I'm not excluding myself, that politicians have perfected the art of delivering, instead of laying bare before them the unvarnished reality of our crisis and the difficult path that we must undertake. And the extraordinary leadership to which I refer must be bold and decisive. There's a school of thought emerging among some vocal elements in Jamaica that before the government takes any important decision, there must be broad consultation and there must be consensus. By the time that consensus is arrived at, if ever at all, the action proposed in the first place may be so disemboweled, because consensus always involves compromises. That by that time the objectives are no longer attainable and the opportunities probably lost. Many of the issues to be dealt with are so contentious that consensus is not possible. Worst of all, a place like Jamaica where we quarrel over nothing. And it's just not possible, given all of the competing interests that exist among the various groups in Jamaica. So I'm suggesting that after the consultations have taken place, yes, there must be consultation. People can't be just led blindly. But after the consultations have taken place, the government must be bold enough to take the tough decision that it considers necessary. It is the government that was elected, not civil society groups. At the end of 5 years, civil society groups don't have to account to the people for how they manage their affairs. And the government that has to account can't go back to the people and say, well, I would have done it, but I had to consult. They must take the decision that they consider necessary, get on with it. And at the end of the day, they claim the credit for it if it succeeds, and if it fails, they must accept the blame for the failure. So my friends, our hopes for success require these two critical components: extraordinary leadership and extraordinary followership. And by leadership, I'm not just referring to the present government or Prime Minister Simpson Miller, for whom I have a great deal of affection. That extraordinary leadership has to come from both parties, from Portia and from Andrew or Audley, whoever emerges from the current leadership panel. Because only then, and I say this in all seriousness, because only then, only when that quality of leadership resides in both parties, only then will we ensure that the cantankerousness of our politics does not become the most binding of all constraints. I hope, and I hope fervently, that we can find a way to create the stage, especially at this crucial time, where that leadership will emerge or assert itself, where followership will abandon its yearning for messiahs, some godlike figure that will put each of us on his back and take us to the promised land. I hope we can create a stage where a leader can say to the followers, this is the road that we have to travel, this is the route we have to take to get to the promised land. I can't carry you on my back one by one, because if I try to do that, most of you will never make it. But if you are prepared to make the sacrifice, if you are prepared to walk that road, knowing well that it is a hard road to travel, but believing that the scriptures proclaim that we shall run and not be weary, we shall walk and not faint, then I will lead the way. As I recall myself saying during the 2007 election campaign, we Jamaicans, we're such a peculiar people. We are too rich to be so poor. We're too blessed to be so stressed. We're too gifted to be so afflicted. And we're too anointed to be so divided. And I feel, with all the experience I've had with 40-odd years in public and political life, I just feel that we have reached a stage in our evolution where we must find a way to run and not get weary, to walk and not fail. I thank you once again. God bless.
Mr. Golden, for that powerful economic analysis. The 5 binding constraints. Now, I know and I heard as I had to take a quick break that some of you are looking forward to questions and answers. Allow me to do it this way. And I need your cooperation if we're going to be able to have questions and answers. First, we have a little time bind that we must adhere to, so that the time that we can allow for questions and answers is going to be 20 minutes total. Secondly, questions and answers is not the last item on our program this evening. We will hear from our CEO, Stephen Hill, at the close of the program. So,
Mr. Golden, what the hell happened to constitutional reform? Was that a principle or just a party platform?
One element of it is already in place, the Charter of Rights, which I had the honor of taking to Parliament in 2010. I don't claim credit for it, it's something that was worked on over 20-odd years, but that's finally in place. That's perhaps the most important element. There were certain other critical components that have not been implemented. I consider among the most important of these the provisions to subject the government to certain constitutional restraints, provisions, for example, for impeachment of public officials. What is holding that up is that many of those things require a referendum. As indeed it requires a referendum to make Jamaica a republic and to remove the Queen as head of state. The present government is insisting that any referendum package must proceed, but not to include the question of replacing the Privy Council with the Caribbean Court of Justice. In other words, it wants to do that through Parliament, or if it is to be put into a referendum, there must be agreement between both parties on it. I myself am open to the question of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The position of the opposition is that such a decision must be made unless the people vote on it in a referendum. I'm hoping that that can be sorted out so that we can proceed. But it's all tied up in, you see, you can't have a referendum every 6 months. It's an expensive proposition. And the intention, I think, was to try and see if we can agree on all of the things that will go before the people in a ballot, have that referendum, and have the whole program completed.
Greetings, Mr. Golden. Do you think that given the vast resources of the diaspora, as unorganized as they are, do you think governments from independence until today has missed an opportunity to nurture the diaspora and its resources in the advancement and development of Jamaica. And lastly, you were, I know it wasn't touched on, but we are family, so we can talk. You were the commander-in-chief of the government a few years ago when an assault was made on Tivoli Gardens. It was a massacre of monumental proportions. Many of us believe hundreds died in that massacre. And to this day, it's being pushed from pillar to post, and this government and your government has tried to sweep it under the carpet, and the carpet is bulging up so high that the souls of these victims are crying out for justice. And don't you think that it would be only fair and just that we have a Nuremberg type of commission of men and women of honor to sit on the council with the power to indict? So the people that were involved in that massacre, our people, they were Jamaicans with the blood of Africa coursing through their veins. And for too long, the lives of our people have been marginalized. And it seems as if they have no work. I'm asking you, do you think...
I'm anxious to respond, but
do you think that the people of Jamaica deserve to have such a commission so justice can be shown, can be treated, so the little people, such as myself, can finally... I'm going to, so that we can believe that justice prevails in Jamaica.
On the first part of your question, I think the government can do more to mobilize the diaspora abroad. Some efforts are being made. I don't think anyone would suggest that the government has been unmindful, any government. But more can always be done. Part of the problem is that you can't mobilize the diaspora purely around patriotism, because they have interests that they have to protect. So for example, if you're asking them to invest their money in Jamaica, you have to assure them that their investment is going to be safe. If you're asking them to put their savings in Jamaica, I mean, you may very well say to them, look, we need foreign exchange in Jamaica, so send your money home and convert it to Jamaican dollars. They're going to want to know, well, when I want to get it back, what is it going to be worth? So it is a two-way thing. On the question of the police military operations in Tivoli, as you probably are aware, the government has announced the establishment of a commission of inquiry. They have recently amended the Commission of Inquiries Act, I believe, in preparation for that commission to make sure that it has more resilient powers. I have indicated myself, and I want to make myself very clear, that as the Prime Minister at the time, I am willing to testify before the commission, provided the way in which the commission is set up, the terms of reference, which I have not yet seen. I've seen the draft, I haven't seen the final terms of reference. And the way in which the commission is to be conducted is genuinely interested in ascertaining truth, and is not going to become a political circus for starboard to perform at my expense. To make that difficult. Yes, I believe that it is necessary to inquire into what happened. But bear in mind that the state of emergency was called, and the operations initiated by the security forces because the security forces were challenged. They were challenged. The question of the authority of the state to bring a part of the state within the ambit of law and order was at risk. Now, what the Commission of Inquiry must determine is, in carrying out that function, did members of the security forces act outside the law? If they did, they must be held accountable for whatever atrocities they did.
Good evening, Mr. Fulll. My name is Michael Nugent of JDP. My thing is this, your government...
Can you speak a little closer to the mic?
your government, which was in power during the time of 2007, you had instituted a barrel fee of $5,000 on each barrel that is shipped from the United States or any other countries coming to your country, coming to Jamaica. And the other thing is...
5,000 Jamaican dollars.
Yes, $5,000, 5,000 Jamaican dollars, right? And as you know that most of the Jamaicans that are living in this area ship those barrels. Why is it that your government and this present government, which has now acted in response by attaching another $1,000 on that barrel?
Oh my God.
Another what?
$1,000.
Where was that?
Which is now $6,000 per barrel. That particular barrel, which most of it is direct food that we're giving back to our own people. Your government and this present government has interjected $6,000 on each barrel that is coming into Jamaica itself. And this is a gift to our folks back home.
Well, I think you have to understand. I think you have to understand so that there are barrels and there are barrels. There are some barrels that contain things that are clearly intended for family and so on. There are barrels that come down and they contain duty-able stuff that are not intended. I think an attempt was being made to address two things. One is to at least ensure that there is some basic minimum revenue that is collected, because the barrels have to be handled. There are customs officers that have to handle the barrels. They have to be paid.
Yes.
And if you getting the barrel, not contributing something to that pay, is the poor little lady who was paying her GCT that will have to put up the money to pay that. So it was intended to provide some flow of revenue to offset the cost.
That was just initiated, but it was $10 per barrel at that time before any $5,000 or $6,000 were added.
With the greatest respect, that $10 cannot really pay the cost.
That's the $10, which is a fee.
But even that, sir, was $1,000.
Now, listen up, please listen up. We have 10 more minutes for questions and answers. Once you, listen up now. We occupy this place at the pleasure of the Schomburg. We cannot put their staff into overtime because we need to abide by our time. Now that's what we're dealing with here. So we have 10 more minutes. Please respect the others in line, ask your question, be brief, and move on. Otherwise, some folks will not get a chance.
If we try to keep the question short, I'll try to keep the answer short as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that was one of my questions too, because I'm very concerned regarding Jamaica being run on just the importation of people sending goods home to their family. You know, I'm very concerned about that. And I think it's $6,500, something like that. It's not just $6,000. It's more. But one of the things I'm concerned about is each time you speak, you are always about the IMF and the World Bank. There's other countries. When we borrow, if you borrow $1, we can hardly afford to pay that $1 back. But the IMF and the World Bank requires an interest, which we can hardly afford. And I'm saying that I don't think we as a country really try to get money from other countries. Some of the, even Gaddafi, when Gaddafi was around, he provided a lot of money to some of the South American countries willing to lend money. Black Americans who provide a lot of money. And I don't feel like we have, you know, tried enough just to hire them from them and they're taking an interest out of it. We're not going to get them.
You see, if you bomb an airplane and kill off 200 people, and then after a while you are contrite and you say, well look, I'm going to be a good boy and I won't do that again. And all of a sudden you get all sorts of concessions. We don't bomb any airplanes. We are so small that the powers of this world no longer. There was a time, you know, when we were important, when we were geopolitically important, because Jamaica was leading the war against expansion of communism in the region. But all of that is past. Our geopolitical importance has disappeared. And we have to understand that we are going to have to find our own salvation and make whatever sacrifices we have to make in order to secure it.
I have only 2 questions. I'm sorry. Jamaica used to be the fastest GPA, what is it, gross domestic product country, fastest growing country at the time when Sanser was the Prime Minister. And I just want to know what happened. Why are we in so much debt now? Or, you know, we're in this predicament. And even Singapore went to Jamaica to find out why we were so successful. Why are we in this trouble now?
Well, I think because we made some fundamental mistakes at the time. We were growing very well. Lee Kuan Yew came from Singapore, saw what we were doing, was so impressed that he copied the plans and went back to Singapore, and the rest is history. We made some terrible mistakes in the 1970s that we are still not recovered from. Don't let me go there. Yes, sir.
Cleveland. I just wanted to get an idea, what are your thoughts on the proposed development of Goat Island as a possible, you know, investment?
I'll tell you quickly.
Yes.
Despite what I said earlier, I'm not suggesting that we can disregard the environmental concern. Though that's not rocket science. We can determine quickly if there are serious hazards for Jamaica. But my view is completely different from that. When Mike Henry was negotiating that project with the Chinese, we insisted that it has to be on the mainland. And we were looking at various sites. I think the last one that was being looked at was that section between Old Harbour Bay, where the JPS power plant is, and Port Esquivel, where the Windalco terminal is. I am concerned that a project like that established on Goat Island, which at the nearest point is over a mile from our shoreline. Our people can't swim out there to go look work. Right? The intention that Mike Henry had was to integrate it with our port system, with the cargo airport that he was hoping to have built at Vernon Field, so that it becomes an integral part of the economy. I think the big danger, and Mike is right, is that what we may end up with, if it proceeds, is a Chinese enclave out at Goat Island, employing Chinese workers, handling Chinese goods, and all that we are going to be able to do is to look at them from the beaches at Old Harbour Bay and that is not going to have any development impact on the country.
Good night, sir. Thank you for coming to address us. My concern is in the area of crime and violence, as you touched on that. It is a blessing for Jamaica to have come away from the partisan political violence, where we no longer have that kind of a scourge like for decades. And God forbid that we should get back to that. My concern is the behavior, the atrocious behavior of parliamentarians in Parliament. It is too combative and insightful, and my question therefore, if there's a code of conduct, which I'm presuming there must be a code of conduct for parliamentarians, what is a code of conduct? Because it is often breached and nothing seems to be done in terms of accountability. That's my
there is a code of conduct so that it's monitored by the political ombudsman, but don't rely on that. Don't rely on that. This thing has to come, if not from the heart, it has to come from the head. So that if it's not from somebody's inner feeling that this is not the way you should behave, it must come from some perception that emerges out of an understanding of where we are and how we got here. And a recognition that if we continue that way, we ain't going nowhere. Which is why I say that it requires extraordinary leadership that must either emerge if it is not already there, or it must assert itself if it is on the job already.
Accountability.
Good evening, Mr. Golding.
Before you ask your question, we're now in overtime, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 more questions only. And then we must hear Stephen Hill, because we're now way over our time. So 2 more, and that will be the end of the questions. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Golding. Thank you for such an eloquent speech. This is blasphemy. I was just going to ask a question about Go Talent, but it was well answered.
Okay, good to know that you're here and to give us some information.
There you go.
Yes, what I'm saying is that we are happy that you're here, that you will give us some information in respect of present situations and also during your administration. You know. What I would like to say this evening and to ask you a question in regards to the bauxite industry in Jamaica.
Yes. What's the question?
The question is that over the years Jamaica had been selling bauxite or been negotiating bauxite agreement with Europe and other parts of the world. And today we are still in a difficult situation even to meet our expenses in the IMF and the World Bank. My other question is why Jamaica continue to negotiate or do business with the IMF and the World Bank when having so stringent measure? Nothing had been laid out properly to help a developing country as Jamaica. And we continue to embark upon the World Bank because their policy seems to be different from the policy that they laid out for the people.
Can I try to answer since we're short on time? We have to be careful that we don't make the mistake. Remember I said we must acknowledge a mistake. Don't bother get into argument about blame. Acknowledge a mistake. A mistake that was made in the 70s is that in response to the global oil crisis at the time, we imposed a thing called a bauxite levy, a production levy. And the result of that was that it just drove the bauxite companies out of the country to the point where we had to take over the plant at Fulll and run it ourselves. And we did a pretty good job of it until we handed it back largely to their management. The price of bauxite is determined not by what we feel we ought to get, but by the market. You know, if there's a downturn in the US economy so that people are not buying as many pots and pans before, people are not taking as many trips with with airplanes that need aluminum, then there's going to be a drop in the price, there's going to be a glut on the market. We have to, it's market sensitive. Insofar as the other part of what you ask is concerned, I share your concern. Let me just speak to it specifically. On every occasion that I spoke at any major World Economic Forum, at the UN, when I was invited kindly by Prime Minister Harper of Canada to attend the G8 summit in Canada, and I suspect that Prime Minister Harper had something to do with it. I was seated next to President Obama. I raised this issue and I suggested that, look, the developed world, you know, America and the European OECD countries, cannot continue to look at countries like Jamaica, you know, as if, well, you know, we'll help you out and so on, but you have to try a thing on your own. The reason for that is we are the market, we the developing countries, we are the market for the industrialized world. If we don't, I mean, when they make their flat screen televisions, we don't make them, we have to buy them from the developed world. We don't make our own tractors, we have to buy them from the developed world. We don't make BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes, we have to buy them from the developed world. And I say to them, you need to try and see if you can get an understanding that if you help us to develop, if you help us to improve the standard of living of our people, so that more of our people can buy Mercedes-Benz and BMWs and flat-screen televisions, you are going to be better off.
We have to try and make them ourselves, not buy them. Make them ourselves.
But the industrial world is so preoccupied now with the recession and with the difficulties. I don't think anybody has that on their agenda right.
Thank you. I apologize to those who are waiting, but I think you can appreciate that time must move forward. Let me just make one quick comment. You know, every organization has a spark plug, a driver, an initiator, someone who has that vision. Oftentimes it's a solitary job and role. But I tell you that CIN was the brainchild of Stephen Hill. And all that you've come to enjoy and expect over Channel 73 and before that Channel 31 came out of this gentleman's head. And so we owe him the opportunity and your attention to come to hear what he has to say on the occasion of our 20th anniversary. Mr. Hill, come on out.
I want to thank the former Prime Minister. This is the second time he has spoken after I have invited him. 4 years ago, I don't know if you remember, Bruce, I invited you to address the graduating class of St. George's College of '59 with Trevor Monroe, Ronnie Thwaites, and myself, and he graciously did it. Likewise, I sent him a letter to speak, and graciously he said, I'd do it. If we could only do that in Jamaica, get things done, move on. We don't do anything. You know, what we have in Jamaica is a passion to do, but not a passion to get it done. And that is the whole problem that exists. Just think of two major projects. The Harmony Cove project, which was supposed to bring casinos and a grand development to the North Coast. Probably the most beautiful strip of land anywhere in the world. If you drive from Montego Bay to Oterius, there's nothing like it. The other one is the hub. All you read in the paper is hub, hub, hub. What we need are to get these projects done. But we can't get it done if we don't have the competent people running the ministries or running the government. So, hopefully, there will be a standstill between Andrew and Audley, and probably they might recall the former Prime Minister. Oh, yeah. Wonderful. I think of the hub, and I think of the Minister of Trade. And I see him in one of these boardrooms trying to convince the Sheikh to come to Jamaica. Look, come and invest. And the Sheikh says after 10 minutes, get me out of here. Why? Because no energy, no passion. And if you think of a Lowell Hawthorne, who could be a Minister of Trade, that project would be executed and implemented in Jamaica. The right people. When last seen, the Sheikh was riding his camel through the desert and says, do not get in touch with me till the Jamaican delegation is left. Why? On the other hand, Lowell would go into the boardroom with a big box of Golden Crust patties. And what would happen? The Sheikh would say, Lowell, I want you to build a plant in Qatar. That is what we need. But We have tonight a wonderful celebration, and I want to salute a number of people who have made CIN possible. Bob is full of flattery. I had a partner, Ronnie Nasrallah, and I'd like to bring his picture up here. Ronnie was my partner, and we spent many, many weeks talking about Oliver and presenting him in the US. I will never forget it because Ronnie had an advertising agency, NCN, Nasrallah, Crawford, and Mewinky. And Sally was a huge Chinese man. And when Ronnie and myself would be discussing and making all these grand plans, Sally would come running and we could hear him down the hall, and Ronnie would be under the desk, tell him I'm in the bathroom. Well, Ronnie is equally he contributed equally to the success of CIN, and I want to salute Ronnie, who yesterday received an award from the government of Jamaica. And who else was very key to the success? Bob, come up here. Bob Gore. Please come up. Bob, come up on stage because Bob has been the Rock of Gibraltar. He taught me so much about television. He educated me, and Bob got it done really to present our first program, Oliver at Large. And I'll give you this good example of getting things done, not wanting to do it. Ronnie and myself bought the rights to Oliver. And we said, okay, where are we going to show it? How are we going to get it done? I had a friend, another Georgian, and the Prime Minister is a fellow Georgian. I don't know if he calls himself JC or Georgian, but we consider him one of us. And Don Miller had a friend at the NAB in Washington, Dwight Ellis. He said he is in charge of the National Association of Broadcasting. I picked up the phone, I called Dwight, I jumped on the plane 2 days later, went to Washington. Sat in Dwight's office, and he said, I have the perfect person for you. And he picked up the phone, and he called Bob Gore. And Bob and myself had a conversation. I went back home, and within a week, I was back in New York, and Bob and myself made plans for the showing of Oliver. It took roughly 3 months from thought to fruition for us to get it done. And that's all we need to do. There is an overarching way to do anything. And while the Prime Minister, Bruce, talks about constraints, I do not see constraints. I see solutions. And if we go up there, we will solve it and achieve it. And Brand Jamaica is not grace. It's creating a prosperity for the people, that they have good shelter, that they can feed themselves, and they can send their children to school. Yeah. Then we will have Brand Jamaica. And so I want to thank you all for watching CIN and making us part of your New York night. So we look forward to seeing you next year, and thank you very much.